Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed, Maria, for that very powerful presentation. So we now have some presentations again on the science of air pollution, and first is Annette Peters, German Research Center for Environmental Health in Germany, who's going to talk about air pollution, one of the world's top killers, the scientific evidence. Annette.
Thank you very much. It's my great pleasure to be here and to give a few scientific highlights on the knowledge of air pollution, which indeed fills rooms of papers and materials. So you have seen these pictures of smoke and smog, but what is actually air pollution? It's a combination of gases and particles which surround us all. And if you imagine, now even in a clean room, you have 5,000 particles in a centimeter cubed. So that's what we breathe in and breathe out. In the air, there are a lot of natural particles like allergens, viruses, bacteria, which our immune system deals with. But there are also the anthropogenic particles, and combustion particles are admitted as very tiny, tiny particles, but they don't stay as that. They agglomerate and they collect gases surrounding them, the toxins surrounding them. So they grow into a scale in which they can float around our cities or float from region to region. So how do these particles enter the body? It's the breathing which takes them in, and they are deposited in our upper airways and deep down into the lungs. Here you see the alveoli, air sacs, which are tightly interlinked with our circulation. It's there where the particles interact with our body, and the very fine particles don't stay there. They go into our circulation as well. So what are the consequences? The consequences are local inflammation. And you have heard about Ella. Ella had this inflammation in our lungs which made the lungs contract and did not allow her to breathe. But this is not the only thing which is happening. It's the immune system activated, and it's a signal which travels into our arteries. And as a consequence, there is an interaction, and we now understand that the signal coming from the lung, as well as the particles themselves, interact with our vessels, so with our bloodstream. And they actually promote atherosclerosis. So it's not only the lungs, it's the entire body which is affected. And we have now evidence from the United States that indeed atherosclerosis, the underlying cause of heart attacks, is progressing. And the dirtier the air is, the higher is your risk of developing this underlying condition. So if we now think about this, the respiratory diseases have been well demonstrated, and this is the first port of entry. Then there is this interaction with our blood system and the circulation, which has the consequence of eliciting cardiovascular disease. Maria already has highlighted the stroke. So it does not stay with the heart, it also can impact our brain. The metabolism is changed by the circulating particles and their signals. So diabetes is also promoted. And we have this impact on reproduction, on premature birth weight and decreased birth weight. So knowing all this, I would like to take you through what we know about the role of ambient air pollution being associated with mortality. And the first solid data which we had in hand to really move regulation forward was coming from the Harvard Six City study, which for the first time in rather a small group of individuals, 8,000 at the time, was showing that yes, there is indeed an increased linear risk no threshold associating fine particles with mortality. Another big American study, the American Cancer Society cohort, actually has impacted the regulation around the world. So it showed consistently again over from 10 microgram per cubic meter fine particles, where it's the current WHO air quality guideline, up to 25 at the time, that there is a link between fine particles and all-cause mortality, which is especially due to cardiopulmonary mortality and lung cancer. A recent publication last year actually showed that this is even true below the current WHO air quality guideline, that there is no linear threshold. What made this discovery possible? It was the satellites, it was the different estimation of air quality, and indeed we need to tightly collaborate with the monitoring and modeling community. And it was the availability of big data. So all the Medicare data of the United States, every hospital treatment and every death above the age of 65 was integrated there. And indeed, there is still no threshold. And so the evidence is strengthening. More and more cohort studies show the same thing all over the world. Well, really all over the world, because a lot of the evidence before this year or last year was really based on the United States and Europe only. But there are more and more studies coming out of China, like this one, coming out of India, showing the same thing, this linear increase in mortality. And it's only that it starts at a higher concentration, so the population is already impacted. If you summarize all the evidence, now based on 39 cohorts, it actually turns out that the relative risk at very low concentration clean air is higher, but that it continues to stay and is really affecting the entire world. And it's not just that the evidence is strengthening for all-cause mortality. Also now, if you look for this study in China, you see this increase in ischemic heart disease, increase in stroke, increase in chronic obstructive lung disease, and increase in lung cancer. So we are all the same, and bad air quality affects us all the same. And indeed, if you again summarize the world evidence which is available to date, this also holds true for all different diseases. So that we can now really estimate the global burden, which is currently around 4 million deaths per year, and which is increasing globally. It's because we are aging. So the non-communicable diseases are much more prevalent. But it's also because in many metropolitan areas around the world, the concentrations are still increasing. And so there is a need to really combat this. And it's worth it, because even in relatively clean countries like the United States, if you look at the low concentration, the people who reach older ages is increasing, and they are also living healthier lives, and also life expectancy is increasing. So to summarize, ambient fine particles are consistently associated with mortality. They kill millions of people globally, and this is due to the impact of the lung on the lung and the heart. More importantly, the additional evidence on cognitive function, metabolic changes, and pregnancy outcomes is not included in these figures. So the global burden we are facing is actually substantially higher. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Annette. the scientific evidence is very clear, and that presentation helped us to understand the extent of that. So thank you very much indeed.